I have a message for you today, and it comes from someone very close to you, so take a slow breath before you keep reading, because what follows is not light or casual. It comes from a place of quiet distance and buried regret, and it is reaching you right now because every moment matters. Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and turn on all notifications, because every video here carries the power to shift how you see things, often in ways you never expected walking in. The person you're thinking of has been carrying something inside for far longer than they've let on, longer than you probably realize. They didn't simply wake up one day and stop thinking about you. They didn't casually move on the way their actions might have suggested. What actually happened is, they buried feelings they weren't ready to face, and buried feelings never really disappear. They sit there quietly building pressure until they finally break through the surface. This message comes from a place of panic, not strength. Right now, this person is anything but calm or settled. They feel scattered in their mind, in their heart, and somewhere deeper than either. Something recently shifted for them. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you, heard your name somewhere unexpected, or maybe life simply got quiet enough that the truth they'd been avoiding finally got too loud to ignore. Whatever the trigger was, it woke something up in them, and now they're facing a realization that genuinely terrifies them. They might lose you for good. This wasn't a gentle realization. It hit them late at night, in the moments they couldn't distract themselves anymore, when scrolling their phone felt hollow and laughing with other people felt like putting on a performance. The quiet forced them to sit with questions they'd been dodging for a long time, and what they noticed hurt. Nobody else feels the way you do. Nobody else listens the way you listen, or somehow understands them without making them feel small or judged for it. Being around you felt safe in a way that never felt suffocating. That's exactly when the panic set in. An urgency like this rarely comes purely from love. A lot of it comes from the fear of losing something you can't replace. If this person could speak honestly right now, without pride getting in the way, without fear twisting their words, they'd probably admit they should have acted much sooner. They assumed there would always be more time. They never thought you'd actually pull back. They didn't fully grasp how deeply their silence would wound you. Only now are they understanding that doing nothing was still a decision, and that decision is exactly what cost them the closeness you two once shared. They regret not showing up when it counted, staying silent instead of speaking up when you needed to hear from them, and choosing comfort over honesty when you deserved the truth. At the time, staying quiet felt like the safer option, and keeping their distance felt like a form of control. They convinced themselves that avoiding hard conversations was a kind of strength, but avoidance always comes with a bill eventually. This person struggles to show their feelings, and it was never because they didn't feel anything. It's the opposite. They feel things intensely and simply never learned how to manage that intensity. Opening up felt like handing someone a weapon that could be used against them, and being vulnerable felt like giving away their power. Admitting how they really felt would have meant confronting parts of themselves they weren't ready to look at directly. Carl Jung once said that what stays hidden in the unconscious doesn't just disappear. It shapes your life from the shadows, and you end up calling it fate instead of recognizing it as your own unresolved stuff. This person has been living out that exact truth without ever realizing it. Instead of confronting what they felt, they let fear and pride make all their choices for them. Silence became their language, and now those choices they never consciously made have produced consequences they can no longer look away from. Here's something worth sitting with. They can feel that you've changed. This person senses that you are not the same version of yourself they used to know. Your energy reads differently now, and your reactions aren't what they used to be. Your silence carries more weight now than your words ever did before. You might still care on some level, but you've stopped chasing them for answers. You've stopped over-explaining yourself, and you've stopped sitting around in quiet sadness, waiting for them to show up. This terrifies them, because they leaned on your patience and your kindness far more than they should have. They assumed you'd always be there, staying soft and open while they stayed closed off and distant. They expected you to wait indefinitely, never imagining you'd eventually reach a point where you chose yourself instead. They feel that shift now. What scares them isn't just the thought of losing you. It's losing the specific way you made them feel seen and understood. They're losing an emotional home they never learned how to properly care for. They're beginning to accept that not every connection can be rebuilt, and not every bond can simply be replaced with something new. They're quietly asking themselves whether they just ruined the one relationship that actually mattered. That question doesn't leave them alone. It follows them into quiet moments, into comparisons with other people that always come up short, into every attempt to move forward that keeps stalling out. This is where all that urgency actually comes from. It's not really about control. It's about the sense that time is running out. They feel that if they wait any longer, you'll be emotionally gone. They can sense a door slowly closing, not with a slam, but with a quiet, final click. That's the most dangerous kind of ending, because once that kind of door shuts, it rarely opens again easily. They want to reach out, to apologize properly, without hiding behind excuses, but fear keeps holding them back. Fear keeps asking them, what if it's already too late? What if you simply don't care anymore? So they hesitate. They type out messages and delete them before hitting send. They rehearse entire conversations in their head that never actually happen, while that sense of urgency keeps building underneath it all. This message isn't a guarantee that everything is suddenly fixed. It's closer to a confession. They're admitting, at least internally, that they took you for granted, and they're scared they hurt you more than they can undo. Realizing the truth this late is painful precisely because it arrives after they've already lost control of the outcome. What actually matters here is what this means for you. This message isn't telling you what to do, and it isn't asking you to sit around and wait. It's simply naming the truth. You mattered far more than they ever showed you, and your absence has spoken louder than your presence ever did. What happens next is entirely your choice. Real power doesn't need to rush just because someone else has fallen into panic. Most people forget that urgency doesn't automatically mean someone is actually ready to change. This person feels this way because they're finally facing the consequences of how they behaved, not because they've magically transformed overnight. They keep replaying old memories now, except they're seeing them through a completely different lens, the lens of loss instead of ego. They remember how you used to check on them, how you tried to genuinely understand them instead of jumping straight to blame. They're realizing you were meeting them at an emotional depth they simply weren't ready for at the time. Jung talked often about the weight we carry from our past, and this person has been living a life where they avoided ever growing emotionally. Now, even your silence feels exposing to them. Before, silence used to feel like breathing room. Now it feels like real distance. They can sense that you're no longer waiting around for them to catch up, and you're no longer shaping your entire life around their confusion. They're afraid that you've found peace without them, that you no longer need answers or a dramatic confrontation to feel whole. You simply move forward. That terrifies them because they were relying on your constant availability. They're only now seeing that you were never asking for perfection, just for consistency and presence. They chose comfort over courage, using their need for space as a convenient excuse to hide. But readiness is a choice, and they didn't choose it back when you were offering them your heart fully. That truth stings now, because the offer isn't sitting there the same way anymore. They notice how differently you speak now, how you no longer feel the need to prove your worth to them. They assumed your gentleness meant infinite patience, never realizing that even patience eventually runs out. They're now caught between wanting you back and dreading the actual work required to keep you. That's exactly why their energy feels so unsettled right now. They're not at peace because their actions still don't match what they claim to feel. They picture themselves as better, more mature, more present, but reality demands they actually follow through on that image, and that's precisely where fear stops them cold. They're afraid of letting you down all over again. What you should understand is that you are no longer waiting around for the right words. You're looking for real, demonstrated change. You've done the work of sitting with your own pain long enough to find clarity on the other side of it. This person is only just beginning that same process. Even if they eventually reach out, things can't simply reset to how they were before because the trust between you has fundamentally shifted. They're standing at a kind of threshold right now. Behind them is the comfort of hiding. In front of them is the risk of real honesty. They know that doing nothing guarantees they lose you completely, but reaching out means finally confronting themselves. You can sense this transition happening. This person is facing their own choices now, and you are no longer standing there in the middle of it with them. You've already moved forward. Loss tends to whisper before it ever screams, and this person is hearing that whisper clearly now. They feel it every time they realize they no longer know exactly where they stand with you. They watch you keep moving ahead, not out of anger, but from a place of clarity, and they're finally facing the truth they spent so long running from. Jung also said that whatever we resist persists. It keeps following us until we deal with it directly. This person resisted the emotional work your connection required, and now that pressure has grown far too large to ignore. They're not only afraid of losing you, they're afraid of what that loss reveals about who they are. They understand now that this was never about bad timing, it was always about fear. They remember every moment they could have simply been honest and chose silence instead. Those small moments they brushed off now feel unbearably heavy. They're seeing clearly that you didn't just walk away one day. You slowly rebuilt your entire life around the reality they kept handing you. You stopped filling in the emotional gaps they left open. You stopped trading your own peace for scraps of their attention. You changed quietly, deliberately, and completely on your own terms. They notice that you no longer lean in trying to be understood or explain yourself repeatedly. Your calm unsettles them more than anything, because calm signals a decision has already been made. You're no longer fighting to force things to change. They're slowly learning that their uncertainty can no longer be used to keep you in a holding pattern. You're standing firmly in self-respect now, and that completely rewrites the rules of the dynamic. They're afraid to reach out because deep down they know they're still not ready. They want to tell you they cared, but they also know that arriving at the truth this late doesn't undo the damage already done. An apology alone can't restore trust without an actual shift in behavior to back it up. They're caught between the person who hides and the person who actually grows, and there's no real growth without some amount of pain involved. Right now, they're sitting directly in that pain. They're beginning to see that you were something like a mirror, reflecting back their own unused potential, and they turned away from what that mirror showed them. Now they feel disconnected from their own sense of self. They're realizing that delaying personal growth doesn't mean escaping it. It just means the eventual reckoning hurts even more once it finally arrives. They quietly admire that you didn't fall apart after they left. You grew instead. You chose yourself, and that earns a kind of respect from them they may never fully say out loud. They know they can't come back to you offering only half of themselves anymore. Part of their struggle is that they don't want to return as the same person who left, but they genuinely don't know who they are without the walls they've hidden behind for years. Still, their struggle is not your responsibility to solve, and their urgency does not determine your worth. You've become fully who you are without needing their permission to exist that way. You're not being cold by holding your ground, you're simply being clear. People evolve, and evolution naturally changes who we're compatible with. This person can sense that the version of you who once would have done absolutely anything for them is simply gone. Real perspective comes from walking through disappointment and coming out changed on the other side, and that's exactly what's happened to you. They know that you would respond to them now with calm instead of desperation, and somehow that calm intimidates them far more than anger ever could, because it proves you're fully in control of yourself. You've been transformed, and that transformation can't be undone just to make someone else more comfortable. They want connection without having to actually change the difficult parts of themselves, and that internal tension is exactly what keeps them frozen instead of acting. They understand that you no longer need their excuses to feel okay. You left because simply caring wasn't enough anymore. You needed someone who was actually present. They're grieving the version of you who used to wait patiently for them. That grief is forcing a kind of honesty out of them, but it's arriving far too late to change much. They're beginning to accept their part in creating the distance between you, yet they still don't know whether reaching out would help or make things worse. They're afraid because once the truth comes out fully, they can't hide behind vagueness anymore. You're not someone they can be evasive with these days. You're grounded now. None of this makes it your job to rescue them from their own discomfort or smooth the path for them. Your only responsibility is to honor the progress you've already made. You're not reacting to their panic. You're waiting for things to actually be right, if they ever are. When someone finally realizes you're worth this late, it can feel validating to hear, but validation was never really the point. What matters is what you choose to do with the life you've already rebuilt. Panic is not the same thing as genuine readiness to become a better person, so don't let empathy pull you back into something that was never healthy for you in the first place. You reached a point where you stopped waiting and finally started living, and this person can feel that shift, that you're operating from a place of self-trust now. You lived through the loneliness of loving someone who wasn't fully present, and that experience taught you the real difference between a fleeting spark and genuine, lasting safety. This person is only just now learning that relationships require consistent effort, not just occasional feelings. They aren't necessarily a villain in this story, but you were never responsible for fixing them either. You already made the choice to choose yourself. If they ever do speak up, you'll be able to hear them with a clear head, and you'll know whether they've actually changed or whether they're simply reacting out of fear. You don't have to walk backward to help anyone heal, including them. This message exists to dissolve any doubt you're carrying. You are never asking for too much. You are asking for the basic requirements of a healthy relationship. If there's ever a future here, it has to meet you at the level you're standing at now. If there isn't, you keep walking forward carrying the peace you've already built for yourself. Move forward with self-respect. If any part of this resonated with you, drop the word clarity in the comments as a sign that you're choosing yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so the next message reaches you exactly when you need it. There's one more layer to this that might be the hardest part for this person to ever fully face. As they sit inside this silence, they're slowly realizing that the version of you they once knew simply doesn't exist anymore. You didn't just move on, you were remade entirely. They're watching from a distance as you build an entire life that no longer has a space carved out for them. For a long time they comforted themselves believing they were the central character in your story, that your sadness, your patience, and your hope all revolved around them. Now they're seeing that your story kept unfolding without them, and they've quietly become a minor character in it. That realization is a massive hit to their ego, but it's also exactly what's pushing them toward real growth. They're seeing that your happiness isn't tied to them at all. It comes from finally deciding your own well-being mattered more than their unfulfilled potential. They miss the way you used to look at them, but they're also unsettled by the way you look at the world now, with eyes that see through games and a heart that no longer settles for scraps. They're wrestling with the idea that they may have simply been a lesson for you, while you were the opportunity they let slip away. They're starting to understand that you didn't give up. You leveled up entirely. That's why their energy feels so heavy right now. They're mourning the version of you that used to wait, while quietly admitting they aren't yet strong enough to meet who you've become. They're realizing love isn't something you store on a shelf and pull down whenever it's convenient. It's a living thing that needs a safe environment to survive, and they remove that safety the moment they refuse to help build it with you. Watching you from a distance, they're learning that real power was never about holding someone's heart while they wait around. Real power is being strong enough to walk away when that heart stops being honored, and you've become exactly that person. While they're still stuck cycling through what-ifs, you're already living inside what actually is. The urgency they feel now is simply proof that they're catching up to a reality you accepted a long time ago. They're only now feeling the full weight of the space they left behind. But remember, their awakening belongs to their own journey. It was never meant to be your destination. You've already arrived somewhere peaceful. Keep standing firmly in your truth. Keep honoring the boundaries you've built. Keep walking toward your own continued growth. You've already done the difficult work, and now everything around you is simply catching up to the version of yourself that already knows its own worth. As this person continues sitting with these heavy realizations, they're arriving at one final understanding. The silence between you two isn't just a pause anymore, it's become a mirror reflecting back every single time they chose to be absent instead of present. For months, they assumed they still held the keys to your heart, available to return to whenever they finally felt ready. But looking at you now, they realize you didn't simply change the lock, you moved somewhere else entirely. They're feeling the cold shock that comes when someone stops being a possibility and quietly becomes a memory instead. This is the point where their regret starts turning into genuine respect for your strength. They're amazed by how you handled their inconsistency without ever becoming bitter or vindictive. They see that your grace was never a weakness. It was proof of exactly how much you were willing to give, and it stings them to admit they never matched that same energy. Part of the urgency they feel now is also rooted in fear of your complete indifference. They're terrified you've reached a point where you no longer even feel the need to forgive them, simply because you've moved entirely past the situation. They keep replaying your last few conversations, searching for traces of the person who once cared so intensely, but all they find is someone steady, balanced, and whole. That discovery creates a quiet kind of panic in them, like shouting into a canyon and hearing absolutely nothing echo back. They're beginning to understand that the real consequence of their silence was never your anger. It was your peace. Your peace proves you don't need them in order to be happy, and that might be the hardest lesson they've ever had to learn. They're also facing the fact that they can't pin this on anyone else. Not timing, not work, not bad luck. They have to look directly in the mirror and admit they simply weren't brave enough to love you the way you deserved. That admission is changing them, even if they never gather the courage to say any of it to your face. The pain of losing you has finally outweighed their fear of actually changing. They're realizing, far too late, that you were a rare, once-in-a-lifetime connection that they treated like something replaceable and ordinary. Now they're left sitting with the same silence they once used as protection, and they're discovering just how lonely that silence actually feels. For you, this all means something different entirely. You've already won the hardest battle there is. You didn't win by getting them back. You won by getting yourself back. You are no longer a passenger riding along in someone else's emotional chaos. You are fully in the driver's seat of your own life. Consider this your confirmation that your instincts were right all along. Your intuition wasn't wrong, your heart was in the right place, and stepping away was necessary. You're free now to move into a future where you never have to justify your worth to anyone again. You can release the need for their apology altogether because your own growth is the only closure you actually require. You've turned your pain into real power, and that power is what will lead you toward a love that's steady, safe, and fully present without condition. Whatever this person eventually decides to do with all of this, whether they finally reach out with real honesty or continue circling the same avoidance they've always known, none of it changes what you've already built for yourself. You didn't rebuild your life waiting for a reaction from them. You rebuilt it because you finally understood that your peace couldn't keep being a bargaining chip in someone else's fear. That understanding is yours now, permanently, regardless of what happens next. If they do reach out one day with real change behind their words, instead of just panic, you'll recognize the difference immediately, because you know your own worth too clearly now to mistake urgency for growth. And if they never reach out at all, that silence will simply confirm what you already sensed a long time ago, that this was always going to require more work from them than they were willing to give. Either way, you're not standing at that threshold waiting anymore. You're already living your life fully on the other side of it, and that is the real victory here, quietly and completely yours.